It was Mother's Day, a day meant for celebration, love, and togetherness. The quiet town of Maysville, Colorado, nestled in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, awoke to the kind of serene beauty that attracts visitors from around the country. Crisp morning air filled the town, the skies were clear, and the sound of chirping birds echoed through the picturesque mountain trails. Suzanne Morphew, a 49-year-old mother of two, set out on what appeared to be a typical morning bike ride. Her daughters were away on a trip, and her husband, Barry Morphew, claimed he was out of town for work. By mid-afternoon, however, concern began to grow. Suzanne hadn't returned. Her phone went unanswered. Calls from family and friends were met with eerie silence. The unease turned into panic when a neighbor, at the family's request, called the authorities to report Suzanne missing. The news spread quickly through the tight-knit community, shaking residents to their core. How could a beloved mother vanish without a trace on such an ordinary day? The small town, used to the safety of its idyllic surroundings, found itself gripped by fear and speculation. As search efforts began, locals clung to hope, unaware of the chilling mystery that was about to unfold. Suzanne Morphew was, by all accounts, the embodiment of a devoted mother. Her daughters, Mallory and Macy, were her pride and joy. Suzanne was active in their lives, always present at school events, sports games, and family gatherings. Her social media painted a portrait of happiness, smiling family photos, captions full of gratitude, and a deep appreciation for life in the Colorado mountains. She was married to Barry Morphew, a successful businessman who specialized in landscaping and real estate. To outsiders, the couple appeared to have it all: a beautiful home, a loving family, and a comfortable lifestyle. Barry often spoke fondly of Suzanne, describing her as the love of his life. But as the days turned into weeks following Suzanne's disappearance, cracks in the picture-perfect image began to emerge. Close friends hinted at tension within the marriage, while neighbors recalled moments of unease. Could there have been more to Suzanne's life than met the eye? The audience is left with the first whispers of doubt, wondering what secrets might lie beneath the surface. The search for Suzanne began immediately, with local law enforcement, search and rescue teams, and volunteers scouring the area. It didn't take long for investigators to stumble upon a critical clue: Suzanne's bike, abandoned near a rugged trail not far from her home. The discovery initially gave hope. Perhaps Suzanne had an accident and was waiting to be rescued. But a closer look at the scene raised more questions than answers. The bike was intact, showing no signs of a crash or struggle. No tire marks indicated a sudden stop or fall, and most chillingly, there were no footprints or drag marks nearby. It was as if Suzanne had simply vanished into thin air. Adding to the puzzle was the absence of Suzanne's personal belongings. Her helmet was nowhere to be found, and her phone was missing. Search dogs brought to the area failed to pick up a strong scent, suggesting she hadn't spent much time there, or perhaps hadn't been there at all. The discovery of the bike marked the first chilling twist in the case. Was this truly an accident, or had someone deliberately placed the bike there to mislead investigators? The uncertainty gripped both the community and investigators, setting the stage for a deeper dive into the mystery surrounding Suzanne's disappearance. In the days following Suzanne's disappearance, Barry Morphew stepped into the spotlight. Appearing in a video released to the public, Barry, visibly emotional, addressed his missing wife directly. His voice quivered as he pleaded, "Suzanne, if anyone is out there that can hear this, that has you, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you. We miss you." To accompany his heartfelt plea, Barry offered a staggering reward of $100,000 for any information leading to Suzanne's safe return. Friends and neighbors rallied around the family, sharing his message and joining the search efforts. For many, Barry's raw emotion and desperation painted a picture of a husband devastated by the sudden loss of his wife. But as the plea circulated, whispers of doubt began to surface. Was Barry's grief genuine, or was it a carefully constructed performance? Observers noted his seemingly rehearsed tone and lack of specific details about Suzanne's disappearance. Some found his behavior odd, even detached, given the circumstances. While the plea tugged at heartstrings, it also drew scrutiny, planting seeds of suspicion in the minds of investigators and the public alike. As investigators dug deeper into Suzanne's disappearance, Barry's alibi for Mother's Day became a focal point of the investigation. Barry claimed he was out of town working on a landscaping project several miles away. According to him, he had left the house early that morning before Suzanne's bike ride and was gone for most of the day. However, details in his timeline didn't quite add up. Surveillance footage from the hotel where Barry stayed showed him discarding items in a dumpster. While he insisted they were merely work materials, the act raised questions. Investigators also noted that Barry's phone had been in airplane mode for several hours that day, making it difficult to verify his exact location. Perhaps most puzzling was a text Barry claimed to have sent to Suzanne that morning, wishing her a happy Mother's Day. When investigators asked to see it, he admitted to deleting the message, explaining that it was too painful to keep. The odd mix of withheld information, missing evidence, and seemingly minor inconsistencies painted a troubling picture. Had Barry's actions on Mother's Day been innocent, or were they part of a deliberate cover-up? As the investigation unfolded, Suzanne's digital footprint revealed troubling insights into her personal life and her relationship with Barry. Investigators combed through her phone, emails, and social media accounts, uncovering a pattern of messages that hinted at a strained marriage. In one particularly haunting message to a friend, Suzanne confided, "He's always watching me. I don't feel safe." Other texts suggested Suzanne was contemplating leaving Barry, expressing a desire for freedom and independence. These communications painted a stark contrast to the outward image of a happy, loving couple. Even more damning was the discovery of Suzanne's secret conversations with a man she had met years earlier. Though the relationship appeared to be mostly emotional, it added a new layer of complexity to the case. Was Suzanne's disappearance tied to her growing unhappiness and plans to start a new chapter of her life? Barry's behavior, coupled with these revelations, raised serious questions. Had Suzanne's desire for change led to conflict and ultimately to tragedy? Investigators began to suspect that the answers to her disappearance might lie not in the wilderness, but within the walls of her own home. As investigators pieced together Suzanne Morphew's life, a startling revelation emerged. Suzanne had been involved in an affair with a man she had reconnected with from her past. This relationship, which had been kept secret from most of her friends and family, painted a more nuanced picture of Suzanne's personal struggles and desires. For Suzanne, the affair wasn't just about infidelity, it was a lifeline, an escape from the constraints of her troubled marriage. The discovery of Suzanne's secret relationship shifted the tone of the investigation. Investigators began to consider whether jealousy or betrayal could have played a role in her disappearance. Barry Morphew, who had already drawn suspicion, was now viewed under an even harsher light. Did Barry know about the affair? Had this revelation pushed him over the edge, leading to a violent confrontation? While investigators couldn't immediately confirm whether Barry was aware of Suzanne's secret, the affair gave motive a sharper focus. This wasn't just a case of a missing person anymore. It was a tangled web of relationships, secrets, and potentially deadly consequences. The investigation took a chilling turn with the discovery of an unusual device hidden among Suzanne's belongings, a spy pen. This innocuous-looking item, equipped with a recording device, had been used by Suzanne to document conversations and interactions in her life. The pen's presence hinted at a deep level of mistrust and fear in Suzanne's world. As investigators examined the recordings, fragments of Suzanne's thoughts and fears began to surface. In one recording, Suzanne confided her feelings of being watched and controlled. Her voice, tinged with a quiet desperation, revealed a woman deeply troubled by her circumstances. "I'm scared," she whispered in one excerpt. "I feel like I'm suffocating." The spy pen provided investigators with chilling evidence of the tension within Suzanne's marriage. While it didn't capture any direct threats, its mere existence raised critical questions. What had driven Suzanne to feel the need to secretly record her interactions? And most hauntingly, did she sense that her life was in danger before her disappearance? As the days stretched into weeks, the search for Suzanne Morphew intensified. Hundreds of volunteers from the community joined law enforcement and professional search and rescue teams to comb the rugged Colorado terrain. Helicopters buzzed overhead, drones captured aerial views of the wilderness, and canine units scoured every inch of the mountainous area near the Morphew home. The search spanned vast areas of dense forest, rocky trails, and steep cliffs. Despite the Herculean effort, no significant breakthroughs emerged. It was as if Suzanne had vanished without a trace, leaving no clues behind. The lack of progress weighed heavily on the community. For every searcher, the sight of Suzanne's smiling face on missing posters was a stark reminder of the stakes. Yet with every passing day, the hope of finding Suzanne alive began to dwindle. Investigators were left with a gnawing question: had they been searching in the wrong place all along? This growing uncertainty deepened the mystery. With no leads, no remains, and no definitive answers, the case was quickly transforming into one of the most baffling disappearances Colorado had ever seen. In May 2021, exactly 1 year after Suzanne's disappearance, law enforcement made a bombshell announcement. Barry Morphew was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and attempting to influence a public official. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community, reigniting both outrage and hope that justice for Suzanne was within reach. Investigators laid out the evidence they had painstakingly collected. Barry's cell phone data revealed erratic activity on the day Suzanne vanished. Records showed him moving around the family's property multiple times in seemingly random patterns, far beyond what could be explained by his alibi of routine yard work. Additionally, surveillance footage captured him making multiple trips to dumpsters across town, disposing of unknown items. Perhaps most damning was DNA evidence. Investigators found Suzanne's DNA in her car, as expected, but there was also unidentified male DNA mixed in, which complicated the narrative. The prosecution alleged that Barry had killed Suzanne in a fit of rage, then staged her bike ride to cover his tracks. They pointed to Suzanne's text messages and the spy pen recordings as evidence of marital discord, suggesting Barry's controlling behavior may have led to a deadly confrontation. But as strong as the allegations seemed, questions loomed. Without Suzanne's body or a clear cause of death, was the case against Barry built on shaky ground? The absence of Suzanne's remains posed a significant challenge for prosecutors. Convicting someone of murder without a body is a daunting task, requiring circumstantial evidence to paint an airtight narrative. In Barry's case, the lack of physical evidence connecting him directly to a crime scene left a void in the prosecution's argument. Barry's defense team seized on this uncertainty, portraying him as a devoted husband wrongfully accused by a desperate prosecution. They argued that the cell phone data was misleading and could easily be explained by normal activities. They questioned the relevance of the DNA found in Suzanne's car, suggesting it could have come from an unrelated source. Public sentiment was divided. Some believed the circumstantial evidence was more than enough to implicate Barry, while others felt the prosecution's case relied too heavily on speculation. Could the jury convict someone of murder based on theory alone? The risks of proceeding without concrete evidence weighed heavily on everyone involved. The courtroom became a battleground where the stakes were nothing less than justice for Suzanne. But as the trial approached, cracks in the case became harder to ignore. leaving many to wonder if the charges against Barry would stick. In a stunning twist, the murder charges against Barry Morphew were dismissed in April 2022, just weeks before the trial was set to begin. The decision shocked the community and reignited debates about the justice system's ability to handle complex cases like Suzanne's. Prosecutors cited a lack of sufficient evidence as the reason for dropping the charges. They admitted that without Suzanne's body, they couldn't definitively prove what had happened to her. Adding to the difficulty was the discovery of critical DNA evidence traces of an unknown male's DNA on Suzanne's belongings. This discovery introduced the possibility of another suspect, throwing the prosecution's theory into question. The judge's ruling was clear. Without more concrete proof, the state could not proceed with the trial. Barry Morphew, once painted as a cold-blooded killer, was now a free man. Emerging from court, Barry and his defense team celebrated the dismissal as a victory, declaring his innocence and blaming the authorities for rushing to judgment. But for Suzanne's family and the public, the dismissal of charges left an unbearable void. Suzanne was still missing, and her fate remained a mystery. The case, once a symbol of hope for justice, now stood as a haunting reminder of how fragile and elusive justice can be. The question lingered: if not Barry, then who? And if Barry was guilty, would he ever face accountability? The dismissal of charges against Barry Morphew in 2022 left the community of Maysville and beyond sharply divided. On one side were those who believed Barry had been the target of an overzealous investigation, a grieving husband who had suffered unjust scrutiny. They pointed to the lack of direct evidence and questioned why law enforcement had moved forward without a stronger case. To these supporters, Barry was a victim, forced to endure public vilification while grappling with the loss of his wife. On the other side were those who remained convinced of Barry's guilt. For them, the inconsistencies in his story, the digital trail of troubling evidence, and Suzanne's documented fears of her husband were impossible to ignore. Frustration bubbled over as they voiced their anger at what they perceived as a failure of the justice system to hold Barry accountable. The debate spilled into online forums, social media, and community discussions. The case became a lightning rod for larger questions about justice and fairness. How much evidence is enough to convict someone? And when a case involves circumstantial evidence, should prosecutors take the risk? As the months passed, the polarized reactions only deepened, leaving Suzanne's fate overshadowed by the swirling arguments about innocence and guilt. In September 2023, over 3 years after Suzanne's disappearance, a stunning development rocked the case. Hunters exploring a remote and rugged area in Saguache County, about 45 miles from Suzanne's home, stumbled upon human remains. Initial reports didn't identify the remains, but the possibility that they belonged to Suzanne sent shockwaves through the community and media. Days later, law enforcement confirmed the worst. The remains were indeed those of Suzanne Morphew. The announcement reignited the case, bringing with it a fresh wave of grief, outrage, and unanswered questions. How had Suzanne ended up in such a remote location? And why had it taken so long to find her? The discovery also raised immediate implications for the investigation. Suzanne's remains were found in an area far from the initial search zones, suggesting that whoever was responsible for her death had gone to great lengths to conceal her body. As investigators began to re-examine the evidence in light of this new finding, one thing became clear: Suzanne's story was far from over. The site where Suzanne's remains were found was as haunting as it was isolated. Nestled deep in the Colorado wilderness, the area was characterized by dense forests, steep inclines, and a rugged, unforgiving landscape. It was the kind of place few people ventured into without a specific purpose, adding a sinister undertone to the discovery. Investigators faced a daunting challenge. Years of exposure to the elements had left little intact, complicating efforts to determine Suzanne's cause of death. Wildlife activity and natural decay had further disturbed the scene, leaving few clues about what had transpired. Despite these obstacles, law enforcement combed the area for anything that could shed light on Suzanne's final moments. They documented the site meticulously, collecting fragments of evidence and analyzing the terrain for signs of how her remains had been left there. Was this location chosen for its remoteness, or had Suzanne been moved there after her death? The eerie silence of the site seemed to hold its own secrets, leaving investigators and the public to wonder if it would finally provide the answers they had sought for so long, or if Suzanne's case would remain an unsolved tragedy. The discovery of Suzanne Morphew's remains in September 2023 prompted an immediate response from Barry Morphew and his legal team. Barry, who had long maintained his innocence, issued a statement through his lawyer expressing deep sorrow for the loss of his wife. His lawyer doubled down on Barry's innocence, framing the discovery as a tragic end to the search for Suzanne, while emphasizing that the dropped charges had already cleared Barry of any wrongdoing. "We hope this finally ends the witch hunt against Barry," his lawyer declared in a public statement. "He is a grieving husband who has suffered enough." Barry himself, visibly emotional in brief appearances, reiterated his love for Suzanne, describing her as the light of his life. However, the discovery also reignited public scrutiny. Critics pointed to the location of Suzanne's remains far from the areas Barry claimed to have searched and the long-standing inconsistencies in his timeline. Did this new development truly vindicate Barry, or did it bring him closer to the heart of the mystery? While his supporters viewed the discovery as a final exoneration, skeptics couldn't ignore the lingering questions about his actions in the days surrounding Suzanne's disappearance. With Suzanne's remains found but no immediate answers provided, the case once again became a hotbed of speculation. Was Suzanne the victim of a random act of violence? Some theorized that a stranger could have abducted her during her bike ride, driving her to the remote location where her remains were ultimately discovered. This theory gained some traction due to the male DNA found in her car, which investigators had never conclusively linked to Barry or anyone else in her life. Others remained steadfast in their belief that this was no random crime, pointing instead to Barry as the prime suspect. They speculated that his knowledge of the area and the timeline of his movements could place him at the scene. Could the remains have been moved to their final location long after her death to mislead investigators? There was also the possibility of a third party, someone unknown to both Suzanne and Barry. Perhaps Suzanne had crossed paths with someone dangerous, unrelated to the family drama, or someone with a hidden motive yet to be uncovered. The theories were as varied as they were troubling, with no single explanation offering a definitive answer. The discovery of Suzanne's remains only deepened the mystery, leaving the public and investigators grappling with even more questions than before. The discovery of Suzanne's remains breathed new urgency into the investigation. Law enforcement, now equipped with physical evidence, began to revisit old leads and reanalyze the case with fresh eyes. Could Suzanne's remains offer clues that had eluded them for years? Forensic experts began the painstaking process of examining her remains. Advanced techniques, including isotope analysis and microscopic examination, were employed to determine a potential timeline and cause of death. Investigators also scoured the area where her body was found, searching for any overlooked evidence, a single fiber, a trace of DNA, or an object that might tie her death to a specific person or scenario. But the challenges were immense. Years of environmental exposure had degraded much of the evidence. Wildlife activity, weather, and time had likely erased critical clues, leaving investigators to work with fragments. Adding to the complexity was the original investigation's focus on Barry, which may have caused law enforcement to miss alternative suspects or theories. Still, hope remained that new forensic breakthroughs could unlock the secrets of Suzanne's final moments. The investigation, now centered on unraveling how she ended up in such a remote area, moved forward with a renewed sense of purpose. Yet the question lingered. After so much time, could the truth about Suzanne Morphew's death finally come to light, or would the answers remain frustratingly out of reach? The discovery of Suzanne Morphew's remains, while bringing some closure, left the case awash in unanswered questions. Why did Suzanne's life end in such a remote and desolate place, miles from her home? Did someone carefully select this location to conceal the truth, or was it the result of a chaotic, unplanned crime? Could Barry Morphew, despite the evidence against him being deemed circumstantial, have orchestrated this tragedy without leaving a definitive trail? If so, why would he choose a location so far from the initial search zones? Or does the presence of unidentified male DNA point to another perpetrator entirely, someone still lurking in the shadows, unknown to investigators and the public alike? Each piece of the puzzle raises more questions than it answers. Suzanne's final moments remain an enigma, leaving investigators and those following the case to grapple with theories, doubts, and the unsettling possibility that the truth may never be fully known. What truly happened to Suzanne Morphew, and who is responsible for her death? As the investigation continues, Suzanne Morphew's memory lives on in the hearts of her daughters, family, and the community she touched. She is remembered as a devoted mother, a loving sister, and a friend who brought light into the lives of those around her. Her disappearance and the subsequent revelations about her life have cast a shadow over that legacy, but they have also highlighted her humanity, her struggles, her hopes, and her resilience. The haunting legacy of Suzanne Morphew's case extends beyond the borders of her small Colorado town. It forces us to confront the hidden truths that often lie beneath the surface of seemingly perfect lives. It challenges us to question the systems designed to deliver justice and the fragility of human relationships. Will justice for Suzanne ever be served? And if it is, will it provide the closure her family and community so desperately need? Or will this case remain one of the most perplexing and unsettling mysteries in recent history? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think happened to Suzanne Morphew? Could justice still be served, or is this case destined to remain unsolved? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of true crime mysteries like this one. Your support helps us keep these stories alive and bring awareness to the pursuit of truth.